Okay, and welcome to part 3 of this series, An Author Learned How to Code, month 3. So if you did not watch the first 2 videos in the series, you should really go back and listen to them and watch them because I talk about a lot of stuff. I talk about several lessons that I learned in the first 2 months, why I got started, how I got started. It's good stuff. Go back and watch because now you're going to be coming in the middle of this story and you're not going to know what happened. So you got to go back and watch. My name is Keith Hayden. I'm an author who learned how to code, and here's what I learned from my second month of learning how to code. So in month 3, well, let me go back real quick to the last video. In the last video, I talked about how, I had this huge trip planned, and we went on the trip, and it really knocked me off of my coding for about 2 weeks. I couldn't do it at all, and it took me a while to get back in the saddle. So during that time, I also found the Bankless Podcast, and it's a great podcast for getting started. I learned so much from that podcast just about basic crypto stuff. It was one of the first crypto, like really hype crypto podcasts or mediums that I found, and they mostly focus on finance because it's bankless, and they're talking about like getting away from centralized finance and taking charge of your crypto wallet and private keys and all that stuff. But they also talk about NFTs. They talk about crypto gaming. They talk about everything Web3 basically. So that was a great way for me to get started. So that kind of kicked off what happened in month 3 for me, which was January of 2022 of this year, where I really started learning about Web3. I remember I started reading about Ethereum. I started reading about Bitcoin, and I learned so much about Web3 in that time. But another thing that happened in January was that I started a new part-time job. So up to this point, I hadn't had a main job at all. I was able to commit to a lot of time. It was the holidays, of course, in December, so I was able to commit a ton of time into practicing code, into learning tech and all that stuff. But all of a sudden, life's just like that. What I say, life's going to happen, right? So started this job, and it was great from that perspective, but it took away time from coding. So this leads me to another lesson, which is don't rush your coding journey. Because obviously when I started working, that led to this kind of sense of urgency. Like I need to get this done. I need to get this down now so I can move on and go to the next thing. And this is a big problem that I think a lot of people have when learning to code, at least from my experience, is that they're so focused on the end outcome, whether it's to get a job or to build a product for a startup or something or whatever, that they rush the building blocks of learning how to code. And that's why a lot of people say, well, you'll hear it all the time, coding is hard. And it's hard because you have all of these little things that need to build on each other and eventually work with each other. But if you're just rushing and you're kind of skipping steps to get to the end, like you're trying to do all these frameworks and stuff, like I know what a framework is in theory, but I don't actually know exactly how it works or anything like that. And I'm glad I don't know. I don't want to know at this point because I don't need to know. Right now, I just need to be focusing on the fundamentals for where I'm at right now. So don't get ahead of yourself. Take your time when you're learning the basics. Go through it thoroughly and slowly at first, and then graduate yourself to the more complicated stuff and concepts to where you can actually get to meet your goals to where you're going with coding. So that's the next lesson that I have. Another thing that happened in January was lots of community engagement. And I mentioned in the first video in this series that my method of documenting my progress for my 100 days of code has been posting on Twitter. And it was really in January that I started to connect with some really awesome people on tech Twitter. They started to know me. I started to know them just through their projects and what they were working on. I met other people who were working through 100 Days of Code that were had started around the same time that I started. So we're kind of in this unofficial cohort of people that are learning how to code. And it was just awesome to feed off of their energy, get motivated, and just keep each other kind of in the game. So that's another lesson that I learned, is that having a community around your coding. I know community is thrown around a lot these days, especially in the NFT and in Web3 and all that stuff. You hear community all the time. Even in entrepreneurship space, you hear community a lot. That's kind of the thing nowadays. but it really did help me. And just like all things, it's about you get into it what you put into it, right? Like if you're just kind of there and you sign up for the Discord server, but you never turn up, you never go, you don't interact, well, you're not going to get anything out of it. But it only takes a little bit of interaction, and hopefully you find a connection with somebody that can help bring you into the community and like make you want to stay and make it a home, like what happened to me. So just trying to reach out to a community, super helpful for learning tech. Next thing that I did in January, it was a busy month, was I actually embarked on my first solo project. And what do I mean by solo project? Well, when you're going through a curriculum like the Odin Project, and I know Free Code Camp has a lot of these as well, any good coding curriculum is going to have projects for you to work on. And, a lot of them are basic projects that, kind of boilerplate that everybody does if they're learning to code. But I took it a step further. And when I finished their, it was a landing page they wanted you to design. When I finished that, I was like, you know what? I want to design my own landing page for something that I wanted to do, a project I was working on at the time. So I went ahead and did that. And y'all, it was hard. It was tough. And let me go back. I don't mean to say it's hard. It just took a lot of time because obviously I don't know. I'm somewhat familiar with CS at this point. I know how to do HTML, but I'm not an expert in them in any way. So it took several weeks, well, several days to figure my way around and learn how to do stuff myself for what I wanted it to do. But it was such a valuable experience for me, and I documented it in a blog post I called What I Learned from Our First Solo Project. And you can find that down in the description. You can take a look at that and learn from what I learned about why you should do a solo project. And you should do one as quickly as possible, especially if you're just starting out in code. You'll learn a lot, trust me. And this inevitably leads to my next lesson, which you're going to get stuck. I remember I hit a time where I really, really wanted to quit my solo project. I'm doing this other job. Like I don't have time. I've got other stuff to do. And this project is just taking me forever. In the time frame when I sit down to code, okay, I don't have time to be stuck for hours. There's not hours for me to code. I only have maybe an hour to do it. So I reached out and asked for help. And I reached out to a good friend he's a software developer. And yeah, it was great. I learned some valuable computer science fundamentals, and I just learned how to ask for help. And it was a valuable experience for me because up until that point, I hadn't really, like I said, I'd been involved in the community, but it was just more like, hey, this is what I worked on. Like I hadn't really asked for help in a technical sense up to that point. So this was kind of a milestone for me. Like first time, hey, I'm really raising my hand and saying, hey, help me with this technical piece. And it worked out great. So don't be too ashamed or prideful to ask for help because it can really save you time in the long run. So that's going to do it for this video. I'm having fun making these. I'm looking forward to the next video in the series. I hope you are too. If you liked this video and got value out of it, please like and subscribe. Tell YouTube that you like it so it shares it to more people. I have a ton of resources in the bottom section, description of this video. The bottom section, otherwise known as the description, right? And let me tell you about my book, Beginner's Guide to Coding in Web3. It's actually a book of all of my tweets that I tweeted out, over 200 tweets that I tweeted out during my 100 Days of Code journey. Yeah, I'd never even heard of this as a book format, but it exists. And it's a lot of fun to see it in a book format, just everything that I learned. And it's so valuable, like I said, going back through my documentation because you see who I interacted with. You see the questions that I asked. You see kind of my progress from complete noob to just, hey, I did this in HTML today, to hey, I'm responding and talking to people who are really big thought leaders in Web3, in crypto, in software development. I started attending Twitter spaces and all of these things. So I think it's super valuable to see somebody else's journey, if nothing else, just for motivation and inspiration. But there's a practical side of this too, because those people are still there. And if you want to reach out for help, you can ask them. If you want to possibly collaborate with them on a project or an NFT project, or you want to possibly get a job, if you go through all this trouble, you could probably connect with them. So there's a lot of value in this. The book's completely free. You can check it out, the link in the description below, and you can get it there. And I seriously hope that it's valuable for you. So I will see you in the next video in this series. Take care.